So good evening, everyone. I see different names, different faces, so that's very good. Because I could not see any face before, so now I can see some faces. It's much better. So today we are continuing our Astral City study, and we will start today with chapter 6, Precious Advice. I'd like to remind you all that this is not a lecture. I do not pretend to make any lecture at all. I would like to consider this as a study where we can all open up our mics, talk, have questions, express ourselves. And that is what makes our study more friendly. Because any study that only one person talks is not any study. All right? There is plenty of audio books everywhere.
Guilherme,
Right?
as we have new people, we can send the PDF book and do a small, talking about the last chapter was about the hospital. Andrea Luiz was looking for the kind of treatments there, right?
Yeah, I can make a summary of what we've been.
Wonderful.
So I guess you all are in the WhatsApp group. So later on, I'll put the book over there. And this book, Nosso Lar, or Astral City, as we call, has been brought by Francisco Cândido Xavier, who's a well-known medium in Brazil, and with André Luiz, a well-known spirit in Brazil as well. And basically, he brought his own history since he passed away, when he arrived in a place that was not very bright, I would say, not very comfy. He was in that area for a couple of years until he was able to be helped. When he was helped, he started to have contact in what we call an astral city. And in that place, he went, first of all, to be treated. And as he was treated, he had been exposed to the nature of his own problems. Making a long story short, basically everything he had been through was his own making. He had made bad choices when he was on Earth, and as a consequence, he had to pass through a few learning lessons. The previous chapter, we were talking about how he was finding the facilities in Astral City. There are lots of things in common with what we have here. And he was describing to us the hospital where he was treated, the facilities around it, few things that he never thought he would find on the other side, and he did. And that's basically, I'm really making a short history about everything. But if you do not know the book, I would recommend to read because it's very interesting. And one thing that I used to say every time I start Nosso Lar or Astral City study is that this book and the other ones, because they have 13 books actually, is a recipe to die better. Because he teaches how to avoid lots of problems on the spiritual world and teaches what to expect on the spiritual world. A lot of people think that when we die, we are like a Casper ghost, like a balloon full of gas that we can move left and right. We don't need to eat, we don't need to sleep, we don't need anything. But it's not like that. And this book is very good to start, to allow us to be acquainted to a different reality, if we are not yet. If you do have any questions because you haven't had the chance to be familiar with the book, please do. We are not in a hurry. We don't have to finish anything here today. I rather prefer to have a conversation, take doubts and things like that, than to miss the opportunity. taking from there, the chapter 6, Precious Advice. The following day, after the evening prayer, Clarence came to see me, accompanied by my attendant. Radiating kindness, he asked affectionately, oh, some words are not easy for me, definitely not. But one thing that got my attention in this sentence is, when we are on earth, I think it's fair to say that we don't pray enough. We don't think we need to pray enough. We don't see the benefit of praying, because this is something that a religion told us to do, or my father, my mom told me to do, and I don't see a need for it. Surprise, surprise. On the spiritual world, we also have to do it. And when we pray, it is not a ritual. It's not just like a mechanic thing. When we pray, when we learn how to pray and when we pray properly, it does change our environment, our energies, and even our physical body. But that's not the subject of this study, but just to give a highlight of how important it is to pray. How are you? A little better, I hope. Like any patient on earth who suddenly finds himself the center of attention, I was moved to self-pity. I'll highlight and come back here. Reverting to my old habit of abusing brotherly love, I began to complain. I am pretty sure you do not know anyone that has self-pity from time to time. And it's even more difficult to find someone that complain all the time, isn't it? We don't know anyone that complains for everything.
I don't.
What? One of the things that make our life more miserable are those two things. Self-pity. Why? Oh, I'm so poor. I do not deserve this thing. Are you sure you do not deserve it? We know that everything that happens to us, there's a reason. If there's a reason, it's most likely that we had an input to make it happen. Maybe not now, maybe not even on this life, but we had our participation to what we have today, to what we suffer today. And complaining is something that is really, really bad to us on earth and to us when we move on to the spiritual world. When we complain, basically, we are saying, God is not good. God is not merciful. And then I put a little bit of self-pity. I do not deserve that. So basically, God, if I understand that God is the master of the universe, is the builder, as some people call, he's not good with me. He's good with everybody else, but not with me. And when we complain, we create what I can say an atmosphere of bad energy. When I do that, I attract spirits that are vibrating at the very same level that I am. So when I start to complain a lot, be sure that you are inviting spirits that you do not want to invite to your home, to your working place, everywhere. I do feel a little better, but I am still suffering a great deal. I hurt below my stomach and I felt a strange sense of anguish in my heart. My cross has been heavy, my friends. I never knew I could withstand so much suffering. Now that I can't think now that I can't think clearly again, I felt sure that these trials have sapped all of my remaining strength. We all do that a little bit from time to time. We all do, because we are not happy all the time, but we need to be careful with that. And as he said here, my cross is too much. We always feel that, isn't it? That's human. We always think that our burden is too much. But we need to remember that we do not receive a burden that we cannot carry. Clarence listened attentively, not showing the least sign of impatience. He even seemed interested, and his attitude encouraged me to continue. Do you really believe that someone start to hear you complain and is very happy to listen to your complaints? Give me a little bit more. Give me. I don't think so. It's more like he was trying to treat André Luiz. He was acting as a shrink, as anything you want, but no one is happy to hear people complaining all the time. Not only that, my moral sufferings are really indescribable. Now that the outside storm has subsided, thanks to the assistance I have received here, I've had to face a storm within my soul. What he's saying here is that now he realized that his spiritual body started to heal a bit. But his soul, that is no longer a soul, because soul is when we are on earth. When we discarnate, we call it spirit. Sorry, I made a mistake. So then his spirit is not okay. He imagine probably lots of thoughts, lots of guilt and things like that, disturbing his spirit. What has become of my wife and children? I wonder whether my eldest child, my only son, has followed the plans I made for him. And what about my dear daughters and my wife, who was sure she would die of loneliness if we were ever parted? What of my wonderful wife? I can still feel the tears from my last moments on earth. Well,
Guilherme,
yeah,
can I make a quick point?
sure.
In our mediumship meetings, sometimes we receive a spirit that with these moral sufferings, a lot of things into their mind, their conscience. They are perhaps, 50 years in spiritual world, and the life here move on, the physical life. Was more or less exactly. So the André Luiz case symbolize or is an example that a lot of spirit go through the same situation in spiritual world, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So this book is amazing because teach us how to know what we can expect when we will be there. And as we are learning now and get knowledge about this situation, perhaps we will be in a better situation than André Luiz. Mm-hmm. Yeah? So I know that.
That's very true. That's one of many cases we've seen over the years. And another thing that he brought to us with that sentence is that we have a sense of property. My wife, my son, my daughter, they belong to me. Did he follow what I told him to do? My footsteps, maybe. You know, we need to be prepared to let it go. By the time our time here is over, we still love our parents, our child, everyone. But we need to learn to let it go. Otherwise, instead of move on, we may be in a very bad situation, suffering, and even more complicated, we may create scenarios where instead of send love to the loved ones, we'll send problems, even with our spiritual presence. So we need to be very careful when we think that we have the right to consider others as property. We need to let it go.
And also, Guilherme.
Can I make?
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think what I was going to say, Elsa, thank you for pointing out, is that he also about the path that I made to my son, how he decides everyone else's life as well, and very concerned that the instructions, everything that I left has been followed the way that I wanted.
It is tricky because we even call that love.
Yeah.
But I've seen spirits suffering from that love. I saw a mother that lost a kid, and the kid came in the meeting, "Mom, please stop. You are hurting me. What you do is creating me a massive problem here. You have to stop." This is not what the mom wanted to hear. His mom was in the meeting. She's a medium. But she's also a mom. So we are not saying that's right or wrong. That's not the point. The point is we need to understand it's fine. Cry is normal. But there's a limit for everything. And that limit is exactly the point where instead of demonstrate our love, we create problems. So we need to be very careful. Not only when someone dies, for example, but even when they are together here on earth. The very same sentiment may create other problems. So we had someone else trying to talk as well. Who was that?
Yes, I was going to make an observation. It seems to me that prior to Andre Luis being rescued from the umbral, it seems that he perhaps wasn't thinking about his family, or maybe he wasn't in a position to because he was suffering so much. It seems that it's only now that his mind is a little bit clearer and he's thinking better, he's thinking about them. So I'm wondering if I'm understanding this correct. And if I am, then it tells us, I think it was about 8 years he spent in that zone, in that lower zone, 8 or 10 years. So there are some people who believe that when their loved ones pass away, they have a habit of going to mediumship meetings or spiritualist centers to get in touch with their family members. And not realizing that perhaps their family members are not in a position to communicate with them. And it's probably not a good idea to try to, quote unquote, evoke them.
I hear what you're saying. And when I lose someone I love, I pray for them. And I hope they will find the best way to go. Everyone has a path to follow. Everyone. And of course, the first week we think more often. But life goes on. We need to continue. And that thing that people like to go to a spirit center or whatever to try to have a talk, it only happens when it has to happen. So I would say that the minority of people will make contact because only the minority will be able to. From the other side, it's not from here to them, it's from them to us. So if happens, is really the minority. And you were right to say that I think it is the first time he mentioned about family. I can make a deal with you. Ebony.
Go right ahead.
Let's think about a scenario where we have we are in a hill and we jump. That moment that we are falling until we touch the bottom, like we will not think about anyone. We just, I'm screaming, you know, but I will be so desperate. It would be hard to think. And that why I'm using that, because probably when you go to a lower zone, like it's more like that. You're falling. You don't know where you are scared, you are afraid about your own life, because to start with, you don't know you died. Or even if you have the perception that you died, you're still alive. So you still feel pain, hunger, cold, everything. So you're still scared. Your survival instinct is still kicking out all the time. Maybe you think a little bit about family, but well, they are better than me, so it's better that I keep my eyes here than think about anywhere else, you know. But of course, in his case, when he was helped, feeling safe, treated, yes, how's my family? Are they okay? This is complicated. This is really complicated. I can't say how long I've been living this nightmarish separation. My continuous suffering has robbed me all sense of time. How often we have a spirit knocking in our meeting rooms, spiritist meetings, that they have no idea from where they come from, when they died, how long they are in the spiritual world, because we lost the idea of time. And to have that kind of feeling, if I can call it like that, you don't need to die. I used to work offshore. I used to go to the boat, to the rig, doesn't matter. The first couple of days, I knew it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. A couple of days later, every day was Monday. Because every day is equal. Nothing changes. Every day is the same routine, the same people. It's like that. Picture yourself in a dark room where someone will feed you 3 times a day through a very narrow access. Because you are very smart, you start to think breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Tomorrow, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And because the person that are keeping you in this dark room decide to remove one of the dishes, you don't know anymore if you are in the morning, if you are at the lunch time, or if you are in the evening. If they remove again another dish, you're still happy because you still have one dish to eat, but you lost completely the sense of time. Because one dish may be giving you any time during the day. You don't know anymore. So I guess being in a lower zone like that is pretty much like that. We're in the dark, nothing to feed, cold, afraid. So I think it's pretty much like that. I can't say how long I've been living. Oh, I read this already. Oh, okay. Where's my poor wife? Weeping beside cold ashes, or at the gates of death herself. What a bitter sorrow. What a terrible fate for a man devoted to his family. Oh, I will highlight it here. Devoted to his family. Why I will highlight that? Because sometimes our perception is incomplete. And this book already explained to us that he was not very devoted after all, right? Very few have gone through as much as I, still complaining. Half an hour later, he's still complaining. I am sure. Why even on earth I suffer years of vicissitudes, bitter disappointment and infirmities, and was granted only a few hours of happiness in return. Of course, I feel so sorry for him. He had no participation at all in what has happened to him. I'm so sorry for him. Then I was subjected to painful physical death, followed by unceased torture in the spirit, and a never-ending succession of misery and tears. There is no meaning of attaining peace. As much as I may wish to adopt an optimistic attitude, I can't help feeling heavy-hearted and full of grief. What an unfortunate fate, generous benefactor. By the time I'm tired already complaining on his behalf here. By the time my feeling of self-pity has reached such proportions that my words gave way to tears, Clarence, however, rose calmly and asked simply, "My dear friend, do you really seek your spiritual cure?" Why he made this question? Because he's doing exactly the opposite. Remember what I said about complaining? We complain about everything. And if we are sick, we complain because we are sick. We complain because God abandoned us. We complain about everything. We are not making things better. Not at all. I nodded in assent, and he went on. Then learn not to speak so much. That's the first lesson to everyone. Do not talk too much of yourself and your sufferings. Self-pity is a symptom of mental illness. Oh, I may have people thinking here, I'm in trouble now. Which is time-consuming and difficult to cure. It's difficult to cure. It is imperative that you create new trains of thoughts and control your words. The only way to spiritual balance is to open your heart to the divine light. If you consider the necessary effort to be an oppressive burden or see a struggle for redemption as an imposition, it is a sure sign of spiritual blindness. The more you dwell on your own painful experience, the more you bind yourselves to them. You can be sure that the same Father whom shelters and watches over you will also care for your loved ones on earth.
Guilherme,
Yes?
a little bit before, the only way to spiritual balance is to open your heart to the divine light, showing humility, humbleness. But he was the boss. He was, of course, me. I was the better husband or whatever, and they should see in a better way. The only way to spiritual equilibrium, balance, is really humility, humbleness. He's not the only one or whatever. No, but it's only these comments now.
No, yeah, it's very important, really. Yes. I complain, everybody complain. That's, I think, is human. The point is, complain less, the minimum as possible. Because if you complain all the time, it's like you cloud in your heart, you cloud in your thoughts, you cloud in yourself, even to the benefactor's support. Because they will have a hard time to reach you. You create like a thick cover around you with all your complaints, with all your whining, that they may try to help you, but they may not succeed because it's so thick, and they have to respect your wishes too, right? As we stopped here, there's one thing. People think that our benefactors will always treat us with love, with utmost care, nice words. But the benefactors, they also have to be very assertive. They need to tell you what you need to hear. And so far, Clarence, he was pretty mild in what he was saying, but sometimes they are more directly to the point, because that's the only way we stop to listen. So let's see if Clarence remains like that, or if he will say, enough is enough, come on. We should certainly regard the family as a sacred institution, but always keep in mind that it is just a small branch of the universal family, under the loving guidance of the Divine Father. I'll stop here a little bit because there's one thing here. Family is sacred. We spoke a little bit earlier here today that he was not a very good example of a father or a husband. Family is the base of everything we have. Family is the base of what we are. If you do have a healthy family, chances are that I will be okay. My kids will be okay. My grandkids will be okay, because they have a solid structure to support problems that will come, because problems will come, if we like or not. But if I don't, things will be more difficult. And we know how many families suffer because, well, one father dies or mother dies or they abandon the kid. Every time we see something like that, it does increase the burden of the spirit. Sometimes he has to go through it, but we can help to minimize all of it. And when he mentioned here about the universal family, our family is not only those connected to us by blood. Our family is, our spiritual family is larger than we thought. Hi, Denise, go on.
Yes, I think when you said about family being sacred, what brought to my mind, I think it was Chico Xavier that said once, first obligation and after adoration. So you always have to do your obligation. And I mean, normally towards your family, towards your neighbors, the people around you, that it's, yeah, I think that was sacred. You can never forget that. There's no point in helping everyone if at home you let people down or you don't do what you need to do.
Correct, correct. We start at home.
Yeah.
We look after those that are close to us, and then we look after those that are not so close to us.
Mm.
But we need to be careful with that as well, because I've seen many people that understood that we only need to look after those that are inside my house. And sometimes they even forget that they could give an hour a week, for example, to help those that are not your relatives. No, I need to give attention only at home. And that becomes an excuse not to do anything outside your home. We need to remember that when I do something to my son, this is an obligation. When I do something to someone I don't even know who they are, this is charity. Is it charity to help my son? Yes. But the weight is more like an obligation that I have to. I agree to do that. And there is the weight of charity that elevates us because we are doing something to someone that we don't even know. So once again, we were talking about words in the previous study. Sometimes we give the meaning of to the words that we want to, because that makes us feel better, almost as an excuse. So we need to be careful with that. You can count on us to resolve your present problems and sketch plans for your future. But neither you nor we have the time to waste on your complaints. He started to talk a little bit more my language. I'm not here to waste my time. Move on, come on, you know. We in this colony accept the hardest toil as a welcome opportunity for ascent, remembering while we plod along, weighted down with debts, that providence is unsurpassing in its love. If you too wish to stay with us, you must learn to think properly. I love that, because all of us, we want to go to a place like that. We really believe we want to go to Astral City or another city, spiritual city like Astral City. But it is the first time he needs to think, because André Luiz is telling, well, Clarence is telling André Luiz, get a grip, time to change. If you do not change, you will not be able to be here. And that is important to all of us, because it doesn't matter where we are, even on Earth. If you don't get a grip and decide to be better people, eventually we'll miss the bus. Meanwhile, my tears had dried. His words had brought me back to my senses. And I was ashamed of my own weakness and adopted a different attitude. While in the flesh, continued Clarence, didn't you compete for lucrative positions? Ooh. Money is one of the problems we may face in our incarnation, knowing the advantages. Didn't you appreciate the legitimate means of increasing the welfare of your loved ones? Weren't you engaged in obtaining just fees in the interest of adding to the comfort and stability of your family? Here, the program is the same. This I will highlight, because we're going to talk about that. Only the details differ. Here we go. Well, Clarence said, in the spiritual world is no different than in the material world. He made a reference a few lines above about money, about work, fees, stability, comfort. As we move on this book, I will try to show you things that I'm sure you never paid attention when you read the book before. We quite often, we read the way we want to understand. We don't want to think about a deeper meaning of the sentences. I know, because I met people from the time that Chico brought Nosso Lar, that he was targeted by spiritists, very charitable people, targeting Chico Xavier because they thought he was obsidiated. They thought he was doing something completely wrong. And we still see things like that nowadays, but at that time was probably very difficult. I wasn't born, so, but I've spoken to people that were there at the time. And as I will try to show you in the book, you may well accept or not. But there's one thing you have to think. If I do not agree or believe in what Chico Xavier and André Luiz brought to us, we need to think about what we want in the Spiritism. do we believe or not? Do we want to believe or not? Because things like he said here is exactly the same. There's a lot of people in the Spiritism environment that do not believe that, trying to find other explanations, trying to find what they want to find over there. If we don't like to work here, if we don't like to study here, what do you want to find when you are in the spiritual world? Exactly the same. So I can do everything by my mind. I don't need to study on the spiritual world. I don't need to work in the spiritual world. I do everything by thought. Thought is powerful. It is powerful. But it's more than that. But then you have the opportunity to see as we move along if it does make sense or not. On Earth, conventionalities and monetary gains are the ruling forces, whereas here we aim at constructive work with less benefits to the immortal spirit. I will stop here just to give you a thought, what I will bring to your attention, and then you make your own decision. On Earth, conventionalities and monetary gains are the ruling forces. Of course, in the spiritual world, we do not expect that we will do things for money. But there is something that we call bonus hora. I don't know how to call that in English. We will find out when we bring to that. It's a kind of return for your activities on the spiritual world. It's an exchange currency, if I can say like that. It's an exchange currency you acquire when you work for the community, and you can change to make your stay more comfortable, because then you can have your own place. You can increase the quality of your own place. Well,
I think it's referred to as merit points.
merit points, I don't remember. Maybe yes.
Merit points.
Yeah.
Points. Merit points.
But this merit points is what? Has a weight that you can
It has a value.
something, right? Here on Earth, we call them money. Over there, merit points. But it plays the same thing. You need to work to gain. You're not forced to work. But if you want to gain, you need to work for the community, helping people. This sounds very material thing, isn't it? But it's in the book. It's not. I'm not the one saying that. That has been brought by Chico Xavier and André Luiz. And it does make sense, because we are very happy to say that the spiritual world is the blueprint of the material world, the origin. We are a poor copy of what happened on the spiritual world. All the spiritists, yeah, that's true. But when we start to make questions like or present things in a different way, well, no, it's not really like that, is it? So we create a shock of information or what we believe or what we want to believe. But if you're not happy, you need to call Chico Xavier to discuss that with him, not with me, all right? So we'll be talking through the book, things like that, and hopefully in the end, you will agree that I'm not that crazy. We look on suffering as a mean to enrich the soul, and on each suffering as a step towards our divine goal. Can you see the difference? Weak souls resist service and remain inactive, venting their complaints to all. Strong ones.
Sorry, Guilherme. Sorry, I find quite strong this phrase, we look on suffering as a means to enrich the soul. I mean, you don't need, why you look on suffering? It's quite strange. You look like, oh yeah, I want to suffer, but you suffer if you need to. You can enrich yourself without suffering.
I hear what you're saying. Have you learned anything only by love?
Yeah, okay. But you suffer just if you need. But if you can learn by love, you don't need to suffer.
You can learn by love. I agree. You can learn by love, but we don't. We don't.
Can I make a little point, Denise? Guilherme? I
Sure.
was thinking, someone here, we can compare perhaps someone that is go to the drugs and is still in the drugs, and we say, oh, he's so weak spirit, he can't go out of the drugs because it was his choice. And of course, it needed therapists, it needs psychologists, counseling, prayer, healing, obsession sessions, so many things that we can join and together help this person that is weak. Inverted commas, it's his choice, his way to do things. That it comes to my mind now.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. Denise,
I don't think it's necessarily suffering, but it's just a word they use to, well, what I understand about suffering, actually, it's a lesson, not a suffering.
Yeah, lesson makes better taste. Thank you.
Yeah, because sometimes you see your challenges as suffering, but actually it's not, it's just a challenge. Now that, well, this book was, you know, dictated a long time ago, I think. It's the same when you read Socrates or Plato, they say demons, and actually it's the spirits. You can change this word. So you can, I do interpret this suffering as lessons, as challenges.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank Thais. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I do not agree with that.
Do you prefer to learn by suffering?
I do not agree with that. Let me explain myself. First, because I like to open a discussion. I always try to take the opportunity to open a discussion. We don't like to suffer. I totally agree with everyone. No one likes to suffer. And when we are facing some situations, I like to put myself in a more comfortable position. That's also very, very human, right? The great majority of people only learn through suffering. The great majority. A minority learn by love, a minority. The degree of suffering is a different thing. I may have a cancer, or I may have a broken bone, I may have some rashes in my skin. It is suffering. The degree of suffering may vary, but it's suffering. What is suffering? Everything that makes us some discomfort. And what is suffering to me may not be suffering to you, because your tolerance to pain is higher than mine. But it's suffering. All those years in the Spiritist centers, if we had 1% of people coming to the Spiritist environment by love, I'm optimist. The great majority come by suffering. And at least 50% of them, they come looking for the magic wand. They don't want to change. They don't care if we tell them that what you're suffering today is a result of one choice you make: alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever. They don't want that. They just want the magic wand to fix that problem at that particular moment in time. But then we all know what's going to happen again if the person does not change. That suffering will return, and quite often return with a higher intensity. And that person returns again. Sometimes the person continues like that through his life. It's his right, I don't care. But he's suffering. Doesn't matter if that word suffering hurt us or not. Suffering is suffering. If you tell me that in your existence on this life, you never suffered anything, you increasing my numbers will be 1.1%. But can you? I cannot. And I consider myself lucky. But I cannot. Even my son, that's 16 years old, he started to suffer when he was 5 years old. I will not disclose the problem here, but he started to suffer, really suffer, 5 years old. Some people start to suffer at middle age. Some people will suffer on the end of the life. But as we like or not, on earth is not yet a place for happiness. If I learn to accept my suffering, I will suffer less. I will suffer less. How many, I don't know if I mentioned that here before, but did you ever say thank you for your pain when you're feeling the pain? If you haven't done that, try. 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 But really thanks your pain. Not just words with your meaning, true meaning, because that may alleviate your pain. And things I say sometimes, or well, things I say sometimes, quite often I practice before I say, because I like to test things before I say, because then I can say with some more property. Try. You may reduce your pain. But if anyone of here never had a suffering, you're very lucky. Hi, Ebony, I see your hands.
Yes, no, I just wanted to tell you that you're not alone in your thinking. I agree with you. We don't like the word suffering. In fact, my daughter thinks I'm strange and I'm weird because I am one of those persons that when I when I suffer, I tell God, thank you for this lesson, for this opportunity to learn. And she thinks I'm just nuts, I'm crazy. And there's a difference between suffering and misery and pain. You can suffer without being miserable and without feeling any pain. And it is through suffering that we evolve and we grow and we progress. Suffering on earth is necessary. And we also need to remember that when we talk about suffering, we're not just talking about physical suffering. We're also talking about moral suffering. For example, being away from family, being away, having to, to be in a situation where you have to go through something all alone, that can cause somebody pain and suffering. The suffering from the being away from family, using that as an example, that is a form of moral suffering. And not very many people can go through something like that. Another form of suffering is to be celibate for your entire lifetime. Or perhaps be in a relationship with a partner and not have sex. That is a form of moral suffering. So we need to embrace the word for what it is. And suffering does not mean pain, and it doesn't necessarily mean misery.
And just to complete what you said, Ebony, I may change the word suffering. I may choose one that create less pain in my ears. Challenge. What else? Adventure. Or you may choose a different name for what is going on, but it does not change the fact of what it is, And I see nowadays, let me just highlight it here because I will not continue from there, only next week, in 2 weeks' time. I see more often people trying to use words that is less sensitive to the ears over the years. but the meaning does not change. I may decide to use different words for activities, different words for, like, one thing that came to my mind here now, indoctrinator. There are people that don't like to use that word indoctrinator. I do like. There are people that use like dialoguers or whatever, it doesn't matter which name you call. The function remains the same. But for some people, the original word create like a pain in the ears or something. And that's just one word that came to my mind here, but there are so many words. And not only on the Spiritism, in life nowadays, you know, you need to be careful the kind of words you use, because some people may say you are racist, some people may say you are this or that, but the meaning remains there. And I think that eventually, the words will have no meanings anymore. But the weight we give to that word will have a difference. Eventually, I don't think we are there yet. Actually, I think we are very far away from that. But one day, the word doesn't mean anything. Your actions, your examples will have more weight than words. But going back, oh, I don't know why I'm saying that, but anyway, but going back to suffering, any of you thought about you not suffering at all? I'm still listening. I don't think we can. I really don't think we can. I don't think we can. We suffer when we wait for our husband to come home, when we wait to our wife to come home. We suffer when our son is like 10 minutes late. It's past 9 o'clock. What's going on with him? So many problems on the road nowadays. We suffer because we're starving. We suffer because we lost someone we love. We suffer. And that suffering is what built character, is what built our spirit. Of course.
Guilherme,
Yes.
I think in the gospel, there is a chapter, the good and bad suffer, o bem e o mal sofrer. So teaching us how really is the main point about sufferings. I will try to find the quotation and I will add in our chat, okay? WhatsApp group.
Yeah, the topic is called to suffer well or to suffer badly.
Yes.
There's a little essay about that.
And we all start suffering badly. We all. Even André Luiz, we just saw that here. Complain as hell. Poor Clarence. He used a whole chapter only complaining. But eventually, he won't complain anymore. He will use that bad suffering and he will convert that into something positive. And one day, we don't have to go through this process of transfer from bad sentiment, bad feeling, bad anything, into good. Because we'll learn from other people. We'll learn from examples. And when we talk about mediumship meeting, do you think we are treating the spirits that are coming? We are treating ourselves. If we are smart enough, we will learn with every spirit that come to our mediumship meetings through their problems. And if we are really smart, we will not do the same mistake. That is learned with love. But if I don't, that spirit that came describe his problem, how he originated the problem, and what was the result of the problem. Unfortunately, I'll have to suffer to learn on my turn. So I count on everyone here that will try not to learn from suffering, but learn from love. But if you do learn from suffering, don't be ashamed. Don't feel guilty of it. Raise your head, move on. Learn this time. Try not to do again. And one day, we won't need to go through these sufferings, not anymore. But the speed that will happen is down to us. It's down to us. If you want to learn quick, all the tools are there. If we don't want to learn that quick, so be it. Well, I love a study where we can talk, where we can share opinions. That's very good. And by the way, I do not put myself in a position that I'm right, nor none of you are wrong. But I hope to create an environment where